In the previous video, we discussed Malthus' findings on the relationship between food supply and population growth. In this video, we're going to talk about the evidence, okay? The real-world data, including the historical, current, and even the projected data, okay? And see if the theory he came up with is supported by the real-world evidence. Okay? Now, let's start with the population growth. Remember, two things Malthus said about the population growth. Number one, he said that before 18th century, the world population was relatively stable. Okay, in other words, we didn't see any explosive growth, dramatic increase in world population. Okay, so on this cartoon, it's actually the shaded area here, or the curve, is the actual data. Okay, it's not like the artificial or man-made ones. It's the actual data. Okay, as you can see, if you take a closer look at this, oops, I'm sorry, before the mid 18th century, you would find that the world population was pretty stable. Okay? There was a moderate growth over time, but again, it took a very long time, and there are a lot of ups and downs. Okay, again, because of natural disaster, because weather, and famine, civil war, things like that. It will, periodically brought down the world population. Okay, actually, in early 19th century, the world population hit 1 million. I'm sorry, 1 billion for the first time. Okay, in early 19th century. In other words, it took the human society several thousand years, at least. Okay, if we talk about the after civilization, several thousand years to have 1 billion people on this planet. However, in the past 200 years, our world population grew from 1 million all the way to above 7 million. Okay, and in the next few years, some estimation says we could hit the eighth million. Okay, and so again, we definitely experienced the population explosion. Okay, as Malthus said. Okay, so about the past and the projected data. Remember, Malthus was published his book in early 19th century, right? So he was right, about the population growth. Okay, and when we look at Asia, as we said before, when we talk about the market size or the extension of the market, we already mentioned that Asia is the most populous region. Okay, especially the East and South and Southeast Asian. These economies are the most populous ones. Okay, this is a picture taken about a decade ago. As you can see here, it's October 2011 in Philippines. They welcomed the symbolic 7 billionth baby. Okay, and here on this chart, we can have a better look at in different regions how their population grow over time. Okay, now as you can see that Asia back in 1950s accounted for more than 50% of the world's population, and the Asian population actually grow pretty fast from 1980 to early 2000. Okay, in other words, when you look at this period within this red box, you didn't find the population growth had been reduced, right? So in terms of the growth here, you should look at the slope of the curve, okay? Not the level, but the slope, because that shows the growth rate, okay? Again, you find the curve gets steeper and steeper. That means the slope is getting larger in this period, right? And that means the population in Asia actually grow faster in that period instead of slower. Okay. We also know that for many Asian economies, including Japan and Asian tigers, they experienced the economic miracle. Okay, in other words, the very fast economic takeoff during the same period of time, right? So this looks like it's against what Malthus said. Remember, Malthus said that the fourth driving force of economic development is a reduction in population growth, right? But we didn't see that in Asia between 1950s and 2000. Okay, we actually saw that, or will see that, in the near future. Okay, in many countries, including Japan and even China, this already happened or is happening. Okay, so we find that the curve gets flatter. Okay, the population growth slows down in recent years and in the near future. Okay, we believe that in 1955 or 2055 or 2060, the population in Asia will hit the highest level, which is 5.3 billion. Okay, and then after that, it actually will head down. Okay, so again, this is something quite interesting we're going to discuss later when we look at China's one-child policy, okay? Because that's the place we're going to spend more time talking about how population affects economic development, okay? Another interesting observation we could make on this chart is Africa, right? You find that, back in 1950s, Africa population is less than Europe. Okay, it's very small, but in the past few decades, its population already took off. Okay, and it will continue doing that. Hold that upward trend for between now and the year 2100. Okay. And by then, we find that the Asians' population would be just 4.7 billion, and the Africa's population would rise to the level of 4.3 billion. In other words, very close to Asians' population. Okay. Now, I said this is interesting because, if what we saw in Asia within this red box, like a higher population growth coincides with the higher economic growth, then the same thing could be copied for Africa in the decades to come, right? That might be a very exciting thing for Africa because, they are, again, experiencing a faster growth of their population. If somehow that can be related or even lead to faster economic growth, then that will, help Africa tremendously with their economic development. Okay? All right. So anyway, we find that up to this point, Malthus was right about the population growth, worldwide. Okay, like what happened before 18th century and what happened after the Industrial Revolution, okay? Specifically the population explosion. Okay? But when it comes to Asia, we find the evidence is not consistent with what Malthus said. Okay, now we are reluctant to draw the conclusion at this point because later, as I said, we're gonna dig deeper and see what is really going on in Asia, especially among different countries. Okay. Another empirical evidence we want to discuss here is the food supply. Okay, remember Malthus talks about the population growth and the food supply, and he said food supply should follow arithmetic growth. In other words, it should grow from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, right? If we consider the law of diminishing returns, then it will be even slower than that. Okay, so every time the increase in food supply should be decreasing when we add more variable input into production, right? Now here, what you see on the screen is the long-term cereal yields in UK, okay? And we show you the UK because that's what Malthus actually focused upon, okay? And you find that here, along with the population explosion, the cereal, including wheat, barley, and oats, their output also experienced the exponential growth. Okay. In other words, we did not really see a curve gets flatter and flatter. We didn't really see the evidence of the law of diminishing returns on this figure, which is very impressive, right? Or simply speaking, Malthus was dead wrong, okay, about the food supply. Now, you probably want to know what happened to other countries. You can go ahead and look at, you can Google these, okay? I believe we can easily find the core yields in the United States, okay? Again, from the early times, like back to 18th century or even earlier, and all the way to the more recent years. Again, you find the same thing, the exponential growth of the corn yields, okay? And something else, again, you can find other types of agricultural crops, okay? And the conclusion stays the same, which is actually pretty easy for us to expect it because this exponential growth, because when you look at the population growth, it's exponential, right? If we did not produce enough food, how could we, keep these extra mouth feed, right? Like as we said, in the past 200 years, the world's population increased to more than 6 billion, right? So we got to produce the food in an exponential way to be able to feed these new babies, right? So again, Malthus was wrong here, and in the next video, we're gonna talk about where he went wrong, okay, and that discussion will lead us to the discussion of the fifth driving force of development, okay, the fifth one and also the last one of this chapter. All right.